Hello and welcome to Faith Backstage, where we are having backstage conversations about faith, life, and ministry. I'm your host, Joey, and I am joined today by the president at Orange and Parent Q and the co-founder of the Phase Project, Kristen Ivy. How are you doing today, Kristen?
So good. It's great to be here with you, Joey.
It's great to see you. I am a huge fan of Orange and all that you guys do. I've been attending Orange Conference with my church for the last 5 years. I so missed getting to do it in 2020. Were you heartbroken not to get to kind of do that?
It's been such a strange year,
Yeah.
We're actually back out on the road right now, and I think that's kind of been very life-giving to be back in spaces with ministry leaders and connecting in real time, hearing stories from people about what this last, year and a half has been like. It was a very, very strange April for us. I've been a part of Orange Conference now for the last 15 years. So I keep kind of having these moments where I just realize I don't know what time of year it is because we didn't have conference. And so kind of that big mile marker in the year didn't happen. And
Yeah. A weird skill that I have is knowing precisely when things happened in years and months. And COVID has just completely removed that from me. I have no idea when it is or when things happened. It's just been such a strange time. I heard that you guys, I think, are coming to Los Angeles, which is where we are. I think in January is what I saw.
Yes, we are. There's no time like the winter for us to want to get out to the West Coast.
Absolutely. It's beautiful here. Really looking forward to that. You're so gracious to come on and have a conversation with me. We don't really know each other at all, so I just wanted to spend a minute kind of at the top getting to know you. I'm really curious, just kind of your background. What kind of faith background were you raised in? What did faith look like in your family?
So growing up, my family was part of the Church of Christ. So I was baptized in the Church of Christ. My grandfather was a deacon in the Church of Christ. And so I attended Church of Christ when I was in Houston, Texas, early on. And actually tell the story just a little bit on tour this year. But I had a friend who invited me to Awana when I was in about the second or third grade. And that is a Baptist program, in case you don't know Awana. And so I was having so much fun learning the songs and the crafts and earning the jewels from my crown in Awana. I came home one day, told my mom I might grow up to be a Baptist. And my parents and my neighbor, Mary White, started praying for me instantly. So I had somewhat of a variety of faith background after my parents divorced when I was in middle school. There was a season where our family wasn't attending church at all. And I kind of found a Baptist youth group, went to a Baptist college and also a Baptist seminary. So I feel like I've been influenced from a number of different denominations. If I'm honest, I love learning theology from a number of different perspectives.
Yeah, totally. Would you say currently you would identify as being part of the Baptist denomination, or where are you at now?
At Orange, we work with over 40 different denominations.
Right.
And I find that there are amazing, wonderful things in each, really in each theological area. And so I don't know, is that the millennial side of me talking? I'm kind of a Gen X millennial blend. So maybe there's part of me that likes to gather the things I like from each faith tradition and
totally
merge them together.
I love that. You're on the cusp. I'm on the cusp between Gen Z and millennial. I'm right there on the dividing year. And I feel that. I've felt that throughout my life, just kind of not really being able to identify with either side. That's awesome. I love that. I'm curious. Yeah, Orange, you obviously, when you write curriculum, you're having to kind of think through how so many different denominations are going to read it and hear it and process it. What does that process look like for you writing curriculum for so many different beliefs and nuances of theology and whatnot?
We are decidedly Christian, so there are some things that, we know what the main priorities are, and those are our guiding principles. But our staff comes from a wide variety of theological traditions as well. So I think each one of our writers and editors brings a little piece of what they were raised, the tradition they were raised in to the table. We have kind of a rigorous process so that every piece of curriculum that goes out has a number of different checkpoints along the way. And part of that is because we know that we're going to agree about the main things, and we're not going to really put into our content those things that are going to be intentionally divisive for different denominations. We know that each church is going to contextualize what they need to contextualize, for their congregation, for their community. There's so much nuance that needs to be brought to the table when you're talking about content for kids and teenagers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we get the curriculum for each month for our kids ministry, we don't alter it a ton, but we do update just like the vocabulary to make it more in line with our church's kind of diction and phraseology and the things that we use. So that's really cool. What originally got you passionate? Is there a moment in your life you can remember just getting really excited about pouring into the next generation, as you guys call it? Young people, students, kids, just kind of that age group. What originally got you passionate about that?
That's such a good question. I think for me, it's probably birthed out of a lot of life experience, moments in my life that made a difference in how I see the world and what I want to give back or put into the world to make it better for others. One of the issues that I feel like is really close to, I don't know, my purpose or my mission has to do with giving people a place to belong, a safe place where they can be really fully seen and fully welcomed and know that they have, a community around them. And that probably drove me in college, I guess, to be volunteering in youth ministries and youth camps and a number of different, I guess, ministry outreach opportunities that I kind of sought, but the goal was always the same: to give somebody a place to feel seen and known and loved and forgiven, and a place where they could belong. And so after college, I was a high school teacher, and that was kind of where I saw myself being able to do that ministry. And after teaching high school for a while and also volunteering in ministry, as I had done for over a decade, I felt like it was time to go back to seminary and start applying really the same mission, just in a different way.
So you were part of the public school system for at least a little bit, right?
Yes. I taught English and biology. So
that's awesome. Are there any kind of major lessons you can remember looking back, just things that you learned kind of being in that world and like being around that age group in that specific context?
I love being a teacher. I
awesome.
never thought that I was going to quit being a teacher. I thought that it was one of the highest callings on the planet. I still do. And I think there are incredible teachers in the world who really understand the value of the classroom as this unique opportunity in a person's life. You have such a front row seat to a young person's life every single day. In elementary world, you're with that same kid all day, every day for an entire year.
Right.
I mean, so many of us as adults can look back and go, oh, I remember my third grade teacher was, and you can name them and you can think about their impact in your life, and not just what they taught you subject matter wise, but how they made you feel, how they made you see yourself, and your ability to contribute in the world. I still love following educators and listening and learning there's almost nobody on the planet that I just love listening to than an educator who gets what the classroom can do for a person in their identity, belonging, purpose formation in those early years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Will you share just a little bit, kind of overall, what you are responsible for at Orange and Parent Q, kind of what falls under your job description, what you're doing from the day to day?
Well, we're a nonprofit organization, and we are called to help those come alongside those who influence the next generation. So everything that we create, everything that we do is on mission to give kids and teenagers a more vibrant, everyday faith that will impact their future. And so we create resources that will turn into curriculum that can be used, in a number of different environments, but we also want to help equip leaders and train parents and caregivers and adults who are on the front lines with kids and teenagers so that they can really lean into those relationships because it's not going to be content necessarily that changes somebody's life. It's going to be the relationship. So we feel like, as an organization, our mission is really connected to giving every kid, every teenager, a person who knows them, who can believe in them, and who feels like they have the skill set they need to be a healthy mentor, caregiver, volunteer in that kid's life.
Yeah. One of the things that originally just got me passionate about what you guys do is the idea of connecting the home with what's happening at church. So kind of connecting what's happening on Sunday or Saturday or whenever church happens for a kid, and their life, Monday through Friday, what's actually going on in the home, and connecting parents with the church. And I'm curious if you could just kind of share from your experience what happens when there's a disconnect between those two things. When a family goes to church on Sunday, but then it's not being lived out, or it's not affecting the way that things are happening in the home, Monday through Friday. It's not being represented authentically.
See, I was going to spin it the other direction, Joey. I think I am very passionate about when ministry leaders, educators, adults whose professional life is given to helping kids and teenagers are out of sync with the everyday realities of a family. Because the number one influence in a young person's life is their family unit, their caregivers. And family is such a personal thing. It shapes us in more ways than we can sum up, right?
Yeah.
And yet, because it's so personal, a lot of us come from a family that maybe looks different than other families around us. In fact, we all come from a family who looks different than families around us. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who has the same family experience that I would say I had growing up. And that's true for so many of us. There's just nuances. I mean, how many of us got into a situation as a young adult where we had roommates, and for the first time in life, we realized, oh, you don't do this thing the way that I just thought everybody did it. I just thought everybody did it that way. And then you realize, oh, that was just my family's, weird way of operating. And because family is so deeply impactful, because it is so formative, I think that those of us who work professionally with kids and teenagers have to do the hard work of figuring out how to be more holistic in our work with kids and teenagers, to think about the entire family unit. I love the work of Diana Garland. She was so forward thinking when it came to, she was the dean of the School of Social Work at Baylor. But she wrote a book called Family Ministry, and it's extensive, but she was really ahead of her time in thinking about, how do we minister not just to the young person who comes into our ministry, but to their entire family unit. There are counselors I know that I met with during the Faith Project research that I conducted a few years back that said, after a decade of working with teenagers and adolescents who had dealt with trauma, or had some behavior issue that they were trying to work through, that they stopped counseling teenagers unless they could have time with parents and caregivers. Because understanding how you can impact the entire family unit is just a much more effective way of helping somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, put the positive spin on it. Like, what becomes possible then when the family is partnered with the church, and there is that authentic, just living out of what is being learned and taught on Sunday morning?
So we just are in the middle of a research project right now, actually, and did a big deep dive into some academic literature that we were reviewing. What does it take? The research has 3 waves. And in the first wave of the project, the question was fundamentally, what does it take to be a good parent or caregiver? What's the one thing that would really help improve your ability to be a parent or caregiver? And if we were to sum up our findings from that, it was empathy. That the most effective parents and caregivers are empathetic toward their child. I have to laugh because I am the mother of 3 kids. Right now, they're 12, 9, and 6. And there are moments as an adult when you will look on and you'll go, okay, I don't know how to empathize right now in this moment with what my 3-year-old is doing and why they're falling apart. And, maybe the level of emotion that they're feeling right now is difficult for me to grasp as a grown person. But our ability as adults to get back into the shoes of a kid or a preteen, or remember, what might it be like to be 12 in 2021 and going through all the hormones and the pressures of adolescence, but with technology that you never even imagined would be on, in your kid's world. And anyway, empathy being central, if we put that on the table for, kind of part one to your question.
Yeah.
Part two was to understand how could we help parents grow in empathy toward their kid. And the greatest indicator in helping a parent succeed toward that skill was whether a parent would say they had somebody, one person, who really supported them as a parent. That's somebody who knows their name, understands their family structure, knows their kid's name, knows the particular challenges that their family is up against, and comes alongside of them to say, like, you've got this. I'm here with you, and you can be everything that this kid needs. It's the person that you can call at a minute's notice and go, hey, help, I'm not okay today. When somebody could name a person and say, I have somebody that's supporting me as a caregiver, that made all the difference in the world. So to answer your question, what is the positive side when a parent is partnered with a ministry leader? I think as ministry leaders, we have a unique opportunity to be that support system to caregivers so that they know there's somebody in my community who really gets us and is here for us, who believes in me, and who's going to champion my relationship with this kid in my home so that we can have the best possible chance at a healthy relationship that will launch them toward the future.
That's awesome. I love that. Have you found that it's harder at like huge mega churches for those kinds of personal connections to happen than at smaller mid-sized churches?
This last week, we were just meeting with a large church who voiced that concern.
Yeah.
Yes. I think anytime that you grow in size, you have to work harder at relationships, but it doesn't make it impossible. I think that there are, things that we always have to fight for. And one of the tensions that we have to manage is how do we stay really deeply relational?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that empathy piece. It's funny. Empathy is not one of my like natural spiritual giftings. It's pretty low. I don't know where it falls for you.
On one hand, I've always been so fascinated with people. And so it's something that I'm always interested in learning. But if I were to say I'm always good at it, no, I think we all have to work really hard at that.
Yeah.
Especially maybe even with the kids in my own home.
Yeah, totally. Thankfully, I married somebody who's extremely empathetic. So feeling good about that. I love the book that you wrote with Reggie Joyner, Don't Miss It. I just was flipping through it, kind of getting ready for our conversation. And one of my favorite things about it is that it was like just so clearly designed for parents, especially just the way that it was thought through of like you could read the left side in an hour and just those like simple basic truths. And then even just reading the right side, would only take you, a day or whatever. It's like 5 minutes and then an hour, right? You could read the left side in 5 minutes. It's amazing because parents are busy. Parents are running around getting kids to the soccer practice and whatnot. I'm just curious kind of where the inspiration for that book came from. And what kind of your partnership looked like with Reggie on that?
This is from an idea that Reggie has been speaking about for a long time. Actually, when I first became a parent and came back to work, one of the things that he told me is the illustration that's in the book, which is you should go get a marble jar and fill it with 936 marbles and take one marble out every week. As a visual reminder of the time that you have with your child, and to remind yourself that your time is limited and your investment each week matters more than you think. And I thought that is the most depressing thing for you to tell a new mother who's just come back to work, trying to figure out how to juggle, career and parenthood and all of these things that she would suggest that I need to be more mindful of the time away from my kid. Um, but there's something revolutionary in that. And I think it's just a reminder that, a number of different things are true. We do have a limited amount of time. We might as well just own that, and not try to, hide it or not think about it or, stuff it away somewhere. Um, and it can take some pressure off. In my own parenting, I think I like to remind myself too that everything doesn't have to happen this week. Like this week didn't have to be this epic, incredible thing where I had, 5 intentional conversations and no disciplinary problems whatsoever. And, my kids have perfect manners now. Like I start putting all this pressure on one week if I lose sight of the time of this idea that there's week after week after week after week that we're together, and there are small deposits along the way that are establishing the relationship that's really going to be what matters in the end.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. I just saw an old friend up in Washington for a wedding that I was going to, and she just started telling me. I mean, I've known about the marble jar thing, for 5 years, and she just started telling me about it. She was like, "Oh yeah, my church is doing this thing. We have a marble jar," and I almost started crying. Because she was a new parent, and it's such a beautiful visual. I'm a very visual person. So as soon as I have kids, I'm planning on buying some marble jars. I want to talk a little bit about the pandemic and everyone's favorite topic, COVID, and kind of churches grappling with that. I'm curious, how can parents stay connected to their churches even when their kids aren't showing up in a building? And I think there can even be circumstances outside of the pandemic or quarantine or whatever that would keep families from going to church on any given Sunday. How can parents stay connected even when their kids aren't showing up for church?
You're absolutely right. Before the pandemic, there were a lot of really good reasons that parents were not coming to church, and that might sound, a little bit uncomfortable. Thinking, well, aren't we all a part of the church? Aren't we all part of ministry? We do value that pretty highly, but talk to families. There are so many stories for why a family wouldn't be coming this Sunday that make a lot of sense. And so it's such a good question for us to be asking outside of the pandemic. One of the gifts, I think, of this past year was we had to face the question like never before. And hopefully, I think it'll produce a lot of creative answers to that. One of those is obviously we all started taking technology just a little bit more seriously to understand that ministry can happen across multiple platforms. We saw a number of churches, start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, really get more intentional with the way that they utilize Facebook groups or social media outlets, create a church app. And one of the things that we did here at Orange is we really went back to the drawing board with ParentQ app to go, how could we make this even better, even stronger in its ability as a platform to connect parents to a local church and their community. And I think it's important that we think about our connection not only in physical spaces on Sunday, but also every day of the week in all the places that parents are already showing up. Because as things even turn back on, we know that church is not going to just be a big return back into the building every Sunday, but it's going to be something new that we have to reimagine, where Sunday physical experience is part of it, but it can't be the only answer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we had to get creative at our church with how we were presenting and providing kids content for kids. And what's cool is we have come back. We came back several months ago, are doing in-person kids services again. But we've continued doing the online content. Like we don't really have any plans to stop doing that. Just having an option for people if, for whatever reason they can't come on Sunday. So yeah, it's just been cool to see the way that the creative ways that I think the pandemic has caused us to evolve and change. I really want to know just what are some of the challenges of balancing full-time ministry and being a full-time parent? Because obviously there's probably a huge calling to both of those on your life. One probably prioritized above the other. But how do you balance those things, and what are kind of some of the challenges that come with balancing those two things?
Well, I've given up on balance. I don't think there is such a thing as arriving at balance in that scenario. And I learned to embrace failure a little bit better every day. I think it's inevitable that, I'll just put it this way. I feel like I'm failing at something most days, maybe every day, definitely every week. But I think a lot for me, learning to stay in the moment and try to choose the thing to fail at this week, and do it on purpose. And there's no roadmap to getting parenting right, to being a perfect caregiver. I think like anything else, it's a relationship that you're paying attention to. And if you're paying attention to the relationship, you know how it ebbs and flows. For me, I have 3 kids. And so there are days when I can tell that, one of the kids is really struggling, and maybe there hasn't been a lot of quality time or connection, or something must be happening at school, or something might be going on, in their friendships. And so you have to make decisions on the fly. Where is the attention going to go today? I saw somebody say recently that attention is our most valuable, resource, the greatest gift that we could give to anybody, not just our time, but our full attention. And we can give our attention to work and career and calling, and that is fulfilling to me. And I think important for my kids to see that I'm leaning into fulfilling a calling with my own life, that I have my own world that, exists outside of them. And also that I care deeply about our relationship. And so it's constantly juggling those things of being the person I was created to be. And a lot of that is my ministry calling and career, and what I get to pour my life into as the president of a nonprofit, that comes alongside so many wonderful leaders to do what I believe is great work in communities all around the world, and also to prioritize those relationships that are closest to me. Again, I don't think there's balance, and I think it's a lot of missteps along the way, but just trying to stay mindful.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate the humility in that. I'm have no doubt that it is challenging being pulled in so many different directions. Did you feel like during the pandemic you got like more quality time with your family than you were having before? Was there kind of a plus side to that, or was there so much to deal with at Orange that kind of didn't happen?
I think it was the latter. I have heard from so many families, though, that a lot of parents did get more connection time at home. So I do believe that is a true statement for many families. For my unique position at Orange, the professional side was intense this last year. So if I were to say otherwise, I think that would not be true. But hey, we're all still here managing.
Yeah, totally. What was kind of like, if we could just go back to March for a sec, like March 2020. I'm just curious, like as things were kicking into gear and we were realizing what was happening, what was your guys' like top priority during that time in terms of like doing what you do best, which is supporting, the leaders who are pouring into the next generation, creating content, that kind of thing? What was like priority number 1?
I would say one of the first things that hit was keeping the lights on for ministry leaders everywhere. We all still tell the story. We remember where we were when Reggie actually got a text from a leader out of Seattle, because that was kind of where it hit first, saying, look, we've got to do online next week, maybe for the next 3 weeks, while things shut down here in Washington State, for these 3 weeks. And so we were like, oh, no problem. We've got you. We're going to get content up online. We're going to reformat everything. We got you covered there in Washington State for 3 weeks. And that quickly spiraled
Yeah.
to, obviously the entire world and for much longer than we ever imagined. But it was instantly out the gate. How can we give kids and teenagers an experience this week so that ministries who work with kids and teenagers can keep the lights on during the pandemic? And then, if you'll remember, Easter was like right around the
Yes.
corner, which is kind of a
Yeah.
big deal for churches. It's this big moment on the calendar that we have. And as Easter was right after, so many ministries started, having to close down physical environments, going, how do we do that? And so one of the next conversations was resourcing families to have intentional moments around Easter 2020. That was fun.
Yeah, totally. No, I remember that first week, as no one really knew what was going on. We didn't know how long it was going to be. In my head, I was like, oh, we'll probably be back by Easter. Like, that's probably when things we're going to be, recovering, coming back. Lo and behold, it was barely the following Easter that we were able to get back in churches. So that's awesome. That's crazy. I mean, there's never been anything that touched so many lives, and so many people had to figure stuff out for so quickly. So thank you so much for all that you did during that time, because I'm sure that many churches around the world felt the blessings of it. I really wanted to ask you just about what the role that specifically technology plays in your house, kind of how you handle that. It's on my mind a little bit as I'm thinking about having a family and what, I'm gonna, the kind of rules I'm gonna have set. What kind of role does technology play in your house, and what does it look like for you guys to use it wisely?
Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Across the board, just
question.
everything?
All of it. I hate all of it. I have 2 preteens now, and I'll say, especially with our oldest son, if he were sitting right here with me, he would tell you the thing we talk about the most this summer are devices.
Wow. Yeah.
So it definitely gives us something to talk about. I'll say that. This morning we were having a meeting with some experts in the field of helping parents navigate technology, and I'm so excited about some things that we've got kind of coming soon with them and leaders who are really, really digging into how technology, or how to help parents navigate technology wisely. In our house, it's been a lot of conversations, like I said, a few rules, and honestly, it's probably one of the areas where I'm most aware that we need people besides just us looking in. I think about things like my kids' friends' parents alerting us and saying, "Hey, did you know this is happening at school with some of the kids?" And I'm constantly aware of how many adults we lean on to keep their eyes open and notice what's happening and talk to each other and really work as a community to help us navigate raising kids with technological responsibility, because there's tremendous benefits that I love and that our kids benefit from every day. So I joke that I hate it. I also love it. There's a lot of benefits. But we're all aware of some of the challenges as well. Again, I would just say definitely it takes more than just one adult to pay attention and to notice.
Yeah, for sure. I thought of a question. Well, when you mentioned having a preteen, which is, you worked on this phase project, which is basically for every age, what a kid is going through, the questions that they're asking, the things that they need to know and hear. But then having kids of your own, you're doing all this almost like research ahead of time before your kids get to those ages. What's kind of been the biggest surprise that you weren't expecting with your kids, even though you did all this research and almost preparation for it? Does anything come to mind?
One of the things that surprised me right now is experiencing things that I read about and realizing how real some of it is. goodness, I'm thinking, oh, this is that thing that I read
Yeah.
about. And now here it is, right in our house in front of me. And it feels just much more real than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that surprises, I think, every parent is how quickly your kid changes phases. You think you get to know them, you think you're in touch, and all of a sudden you look up and they're,
Yeah.
a little bit older. Um, and I think 2 weeks to a 9-year-old is a lot more significant than 2 weeks to a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently talking with a kid, not one of my own, but who was going through some changes in their family. And having a conversation with them, they made the observation that someone who had been close to them no longer knew very much about them because they hadn't spent much time together recently. And knowing this child and everything that was going on in their life, I thought, wow, that hasn't even been change for very long. And yet it feels so long and so real to this child that 1 month to them feels like the equivalent of a year and a half. And if that feels true to them, then that's their reality. And that's back to that empathy piece of listening and leaning in and going, this must have been a really significant month then for you.
Dang, that's crazy. That's a lot.
Mhm.
Something that I just noticed, I was kind of looking at your Instagram and getting ready for this conversation. And something that I noticed that you're really passionate about, which I love, is just that social justice piece that we've been talking that the world has been paying way more attention to over the past year. It seems like you're really just passionate about like racial reconciliation and diversity. And I'm curious, are there any specific ways that you've kind of pursued that at Orange and taken steps in that direction?
Many, and not enough at the same time. As a nonprofit organization committed to giving kids a better future, one of the most important things for us to pay attention to is what will give every kid a better future. What are the ways in which we could leave the world a better place than we found it? Because giving kids and teenagers a better future isn't just teaching them as grown-ups, everything that we know as adults, to pass on a legacy for the next generation. It's also about learning from human history in order to build a better future for the kids and teenagers who are, growing up today. I don't think that we could have the mission that we have and not take social justice issues very seriously for so many different reasons. And part of that even has to do with the credibility of the church. If the church is going to be credible to a generation, we cannot stay silent about the things that are, impacting real lives around us. I think the world is watching, and how the church responds in this moment will speak volumes. And so we've been having conversations about the impacts of racism for maybe 5 or 6 years at every Orange event that we've hosted. So from Orange Conference to Orange Tour, it is always a conversation that we have with purpose, because if we're going to be leaders that are impacting the next generation, we do feel like this is critical. At Orange as an organization, we're continuing, like most organizations, to learn what we need to learn, and to be in relationships with people where we can grow, where we can, do our homework, continue to try to see things that maybe we haven't seen, educate ourselves where we maybe haven't been educated, making changes not only to just how we operate, who we are, how we think through our content and resources at every level. I think this conversation has really impacted every single thing that we do and how we do it.
Were you able to kind of have any just like great conversations in your family over the past year with all the stuff that was coming up?
Mhm.
It just felt like a pressure cooker of a year in terms of conversations and things coming to the surface that never really had been before. And especially, I think having a preteen who's probably pretty aware of what's going on in the world. Were you
Mhm.
able to have any just like great conversations for the first time? And how did you kind of lead them through those?
We've had a lot of conversations. We've read books together,
Mm-hmm.
even given them books. I know that there's some graphic novels, like what are they? The comic book type series that was written by John Lewis, all about his experience through the marches, and I think it's actually called March. Are
Mm-hmm.
the name is the name of the series. So my son read the March series by John Lewis, and we talked about that. There have been other books, like a kid's book about racism, that we were able to use more to talk to our youngest child, who's 6, and so they've been very aware of what's going on and asking questions. Actually, my middle child has been the one who's asked the most questions and been the most forthright. And um, she's the one who would come home and say, what happened with George Floyd?
Mm-hmm.
And tell me specifically what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we respond and the way that we answer, I think is important to open those conversations to say, this is important, and it's important what you think about it and how we all respond to it.
Do you think it's important? I mean, I'm sure you do. So I guess I'm more curious to hear, like, in what ways can we be just like challenging and equipping the next generation to have conversations about social justice, kind of in our churches and in our small groups and in those like more intimate places.
It starts with you. It starts with us, right? I'm pointing to myself. I think each individual person has to take on the responsibility to seek out information and to seek out a perspective that maybe, you haven't heard before, no matter where you come from, no matter where you enter this conversation from. It's important to be thinking about the complexities of perspective and the complexities of a historical narrative,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to embrace this idea that history is not just one thing. It's a complicated human narrative that can be told from hundreds of thousands of lenses. And then for us to be honest with whatever lens that we've kind of come into this with, and to seek out, how is that impacting um, our decision making? How is that impacting policy? How is that impacting lawmaking? How is that impacting legislation and education and so many other aspects that are going to impact uh, the future generation? And I think it has to start with us, and it has to also be something that we're living out in our everyday life, in community with others and with people who maybe don't look like us, so that we can have a shared conversation around um, what this looks like. I think when you're growing, when you're changing, when you're learning, when you're leaning in, and when you're curious, then kids are watching that. And so modeling and making justice and love a part of who you are as a person is the thing that will translate to kids and to teenagers. And then engaging them in the process, engaging them in the dialogue, um, being honest about where you've come from and what
Mm-hmm.
you're questioning and what you're learning now, and allowing them to kind of participate in that.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that was most challenging for me over the past year, the thing that I've been growing in most, that God's been growing me in, is really that historical piece that you were talking about of like just understanding specifically our country's history. And specifically the aspect of like America not being founded as a Christian nation and like what it means. Like, because I grew up, you know, at a private Christian school and I was taught, you know, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492, you know, modern day pilgrims coming to take the promised land. And just kind of like learning how untrue, how much of a narrative that was like almost built and designed and constructed over time that is. I'm curious, just kind of, I'm sure, you know, you and everyone on your team has your eyes on the horizon in terms of just like what the future looks like. What do you think are just kind of some of the concerns that you have for the next generation, some of the biggest challenges that they're going to be facing in specifically in the way just that our world is changing and evolving? What are going to be some of the challenges for a kid growing up in the next, you know, 10 to 20 years?
I think there's a lot of exciting potential for kids who are growing up now. You know, all of the studies on Gen Z highlight some amazing characteristics of this generation. And so I wouldn't want to lose sight of what is right and what is hopeful and what is, I think, going to be, you know, it's just going to be exciting to get to watch the future that they are building even now.
That is what I wanted to jump into next is like the hope piece. So whichever you want to tackle in whatever order you want to tackle them in is good.
I don't want to lose sight of that in the midst of it. And yet there are also very real concerns. One of those is obviously mental health. If you look at what's happening in, you know, adolescence and even, you know, later elementary age kids, when it comes to anxiety and depression and suicide and some very real mental health crises that are facing young people, and start peeling back the layers of why and what's going on and what they're up against and facing that maybe some of us who, you know, are adults never had to face when we were their age. That is by far one of the leading concerns that I would have for this generation, that they would not despair and lose hope, and that we would find real solutions to what's causing a rise in mental health, you know, concerns, and also how those can be most effectively addressed. And some of that is linked to the technology question, I think, from before. But the way that we, you know, are students of what's taking place right now. If you know, go back to when I was in high school a long time ago now, you know, the concerns were more about, you know, drugs or, you know, you could go to other, and then you look at this and go, okay, but this feels very heavy and very real, and something that anybody working with the next generation should be paying attention to.
Yeah, totally. Well, so you mentioned specifically Gen Z, some of the characteristics, some of the positive characteristics that you see. Will you talk a little bit just about some of those that you've identified?
I think there's so much optimism and so much belief in their ability to collaborate, to come together, to cooperate, and to make something new. You're talking about a generation who has had more, I think, opportunity at their fingertips because of technology as well. Yes. And so they're able to participate in making the world better right now. There is no wait for, you know, the real world someday. The real world is right here, right now. And what are you going to make of it? And I think there is a global mindset where you have a generation that's able to access a more global narrative. They're able to think about, you know, how do my personal actions impact not only myself and my family, but my friends and my community and everybody, you know, in the world. And so they care about a lot of the things that we should care about as followers of Jesus. They care about the creation. And that's part of our Christian narrative. That's part of our Christian heritage. They care about how we love each other and how we treat each other. Again, part of who we are as Christians is called back to an ethic of love. And that's something that is a leading characteristic of this generation, that they're ready for love and love in action and love right now, when it comes to, kind of a global community.
Yeah, totally. It's a very creative generation. I think specifically just I don't know. I am a big TikTok user. I really enjoy. Honestly, people laugh at me when I go into this, but I really love it as a platform because it is so creative. It is so artistic, and everyone's doing funny voices and bits and skits, and it's just entertaining. It feels so much more entertaining than Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So I love to see the ways that Gen Z, has been kind of coming into their own, I think, especially in the last couple of years. And it's exciting. And I'm curious, how do you think parents and church leaders can be pouring fuel onto that fire that you were talking about these kids and students being excited about these issues, about love and being able to make the world a better place? How can parents and church leaders kind of just like fuel what is already happening there?
Giving kids and teenagers a place to participate. Let them participate and create and lead. And, again, there is no patience for waiting until someday to get to participate. Kids and teenagers want to plug in and do something meaningful right now. I actually just got back from an Orange tour, and I took my 12-year-old son with me, and we put him in charge of the lights in the production booth, and he was in charge of lights like it was a calling. I will just tell you, he was texting everybody from his iPad that he has, everybody in our family. I'm in charge of lights. When Mr. Nate says go video, I turn the lights down. If you want blue lights, I can make the lights blue. I mean, he was all about this opportunity to participate and contribute and be a part and produce something and make something for people. And I watched him and his friends figure out how to do video editing, so that they can make videos for YouTube, or they're ready to create right now. All we have to do is set them loose and say, what can you make? What are you going to make? What are you going to create? What are you going to produce? And that's one of the most exciting things to just watch and, see what happens.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Honestly, I'm pumped. I'm really excited about what that generation is going to be able to do, specifically in terms of the church and advancing the kingdom and the gospel.
Don't put them in a box. That's for
For sure. No, definitely. So I end each episode by asking for a few recommendations. It can be anywhere across the board. It can be books, podcasts, movies, TV shows, fun or more on the serious side. So whatever comes to mind.
The thing I'm into right now is I'm really enjoying biographies.
Okay.
Because I love to just listen to somebody's life story. It doesn't necessarily have to have like 5 points or, these are the 5 ways to succeed at whatever. It's just someone's lived experience. And the one that I am in the middle of right now is My Life, My Legacy, which is Coretta Scott King's biography. And just learning a lot of things that I never really knew about her story specifically. So I would recommend. I would recommend that to anybody who's interested in both history and somebody's life.
Are there any books that you just love, specifically in the social justice realm, that you've read over the past couple of years?
I have a list of books that kind of come through my mind when you talk about social justice. I have learned in that area from books, from podcasts, from social media channels, and from relationships. And so there's probably a long list, and so much of it is just nuanced based on, where I was particularly curious and where I was headed in a pursuit of learning.
Gotcha.
One that I think was interesting specifically for church is actually written by a white author, which is unique maybe in this space. And it's called White Too Long. And it is really a narrative about the church's participation in racism. And it's done from the perspective of a researcher who conducted research and found that people who had grown up in white church actually showed higher signs of racism than people who did not grow up in church, which is a really unsettling finding.
That's like chilling.
It really is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's an uncomfortable that I think we should lean into to ask a lot more questions, which he did, and portrays, a full story about why that might be. And I think it's important work to really go into that that discomfort, and go, okay, if this is true, then what does the next chapter need to look like? How do we rebuild something where that might no longer be true?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thank you for those. And thank you so much for being on. It's been such a joy talking to you. I love how every time I've been like, well, what's the dark part of this? You're like, no, but the hope and the light. I just feel like that's the way that that's the lens you view the entire world through, is what is the hope here? How can, this be used to make a difference? What's the positivity in this? And so I just so appreciate the ministry that you do and all that you're doing. And I am just so blessed to have been able to chat with you for a little bit. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Joey. We're really grateful for the work that you're doing as well for Faith Backstage, as well as in your community. I know that you're making tremendous impact in families' lives everywhere. So very, very grateful for the conversation today.